Okay.
So, good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming to our very first uh, National Circle Teach Out. The Teach Out is a signature program for the National Circle, and the very first one is being done by myself, Dr. Denisha McPherson, PRP, which is Professional Registered Parliamentarian, and I am the ODK National Circle President. And today's meeting is going to be on good meeting governance, elevate your meetings with practical parliamentary procedures and expert insights. And today you're going to learn about strategies for productive meetings, managing group dynamics, and leading with confidence. I'm going to pass it off to Michelle Burke, and we'll be talking a little bit about the National Circle.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We are recording this session, so this will be shareable information that you can access later on and share with other members of your organization and other leaders. But Omicron Delta Kappa is the premier National Leadership Honor Society. It's been around since 1914, has more than 350,000 living members that are a wonderful network throughout the world, really, to celebrate leadership and share leadership development, which is what we're doing today. The Teach Out series is part of Omicron Delta Kappa's tradition of training and developing leadership in all the different ways, all forms. And this program is, in particular, is funded by the Maurice Clay Leadership Development Grant from the Omicron Delta Kappa Foundation. So thanks to the foundation for their support of this signature program of the new National Circle. If we want to go to the next slide. I'd like to tell you more about the National Circle of Omicron Delta Kappa. It is a virtual circle, so all the members come from across the country, and some are even in other parts of the world. But we induct members into Omicron Delta Kappa on college campuses. We have been at more than 400 college campuses across the United States. But some college campuses, we do not yet have an active circle. So we honor students and faculty staff with membership by becoming part of our virtual circle that offers this kind of leadership opportunity and also service opportunities and networking. If you'd like to learn more, we'll share a link in the chat where you can learn more about the National Circle. The Teach Out series is the first signature program of the National Circle. We do have another event coming up May 17th. And that's going to be Saturday at noon on May 17th is our next Teach Out series offered by our Vice President, Chris Thomas, who will share information about making the transition from a military career to a civilian career. And that's something that a lot of our members are experiencing. So if you're not yet a member of Omicron Delta Kappa, we encourage you to learn more and to possibly join. Our next application round is due March 14th. If we want to go to the next slide. If you are already a member of ODK, welcome. We're happy to have you with us today. And there's a nomination form that you can nominate members or nominate people in your network who are not yet members of Omicron Delta Kappa. Eligibility is for students who are currently enrolled at a campus that does not yet have an ODK circle with 30 or more credits, or it can be a faculty or staff member who's employed at one of those institutions. We look for an outstanding academic record and demonstrated leadership in at least one of the 5 pillars recognized by ODK, pillars of leadership. So we'll put different links in the chat that you can take a look at and learn more about the National Circle. We will be sharing an email with all of our participants tomorrow to learn more about your experience with this program and also have information about how to nominate and how to join. And we will also have a door prize drawing. We'll be sharing a book on good governance and providing one participant today with their own book. So look for that to come as well. So I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. McPherson for our program on good governance.
Thank you so much, Michelle. I appreciate your help. Okay, so good meeting governance. Elevate your meetings with practical parliamentary procedures and expert insights. So, why are we here? The objective of the session is that you're going to learn strategies for running productive and efficient meetings. And why that's important, I know everyone at one point or another has said, this meeting could have been an email. And this program is designed to kind of show you how to run meetings more efficiently, save time, get people the information that they want to get. And then we want to also help you to understand the techniques for managing groups of large people, small groups, big groups, all types of groups, and then how to resolve conflict when all groups get together and meet. Because, people have conflicts, they get into scraps. And we want to make sure that we get the best out of our meetings without strife and without having contentious meetings. And then I want you to be able to confidently handle challenging participants, participants that are going to test your patience. And I want you to end have practical tools that you can implement to set impactful agendas and then also lead meaningful discussions between your members and the public at large. So, why good meeting governance matters? When you look at the numbers, there's about 55 million meetings every single day. And that's meetings, whether it's at work, whether it's in your civic organizations, whether it's fraternities, sororities, it's meetings. We have meetings all the time. And that cost per year is about $1.4 trillion. And I know that sounds crazy, but meetings consume a significant amount of the organization's time and their resources. So we want to make sure that you understand when meetings are run poorly, they lead to inefficiency, frustration, and wasted time. And we want to help you to get the best out of your meetings. And so there's this quote that I found um, that said that over 70% of all meetings are unproductive and unnecessarily long. And I know all of us have sat in a meeting where we're just like, are they ever going to stop? And there are many solutions for that, but a well structured agenda will help you to get better meetings, and it can cut meeting times by up to 80% and drastically improve decision making. Because ultimately, when we are in our organizations, we want to make sure that we are making decisions that are going to help our organizations thrive and survive. And as we're going along in this presentation, I want you to feel free to drop a question in the question and answer session. And periodically, I may ask either Michelle or Brent to read some of the questions there so that um, we can answer your questions. But don't worry, we will answer some questions also in a Q&A session. So if you have a burning question, please put it in the Q&A so that we can get those questions answered for you tonight. So, a lot of deliberative assemblies, which is a deliberative assembly, is a grouping of people that get together for a particular purpose, whether it's a social club, whether it's a civic club, whether it is an organization like Omicron Delta Kappa. We get together and we have meetings. And for most organizations, not all, but most, one of the guiding principles or books that organizations have that their bylaws follow is Robert's Rule of Order. Robert's Rule of Order is a book that has been around since the 1800s. And the core principle of Robert's rules is that we have a majority rule. It's a democracy, but we also make sure that we have respect for the minority. And in that case, when there is dissension or there's disagreements, we put it up to the body to make these decisions. And ultimately, by voting and general practice, we're able to make better decisions for our organizations. So the other principle that Robert's Rules states is that there's an equal opportunity for participation. So whether it's a large group or it's a small group, we always want to make sure that the voice of the participants are heard, and we want to make sure that the organization can have and make decisions that are benefit the organization in the long run. And the beautiful thing about Robert's Rule is that it's adaptable to any organization or group. So even whether it's a small group that you create, or a group that's been around for 100+ years like ODK, Robert's rules is adaptable for an organization of any size. So this may be a little eye test, but this is a flow chart showing what the rule of order is. So we start with making a motion. So in the case where you want a decision to be brought before the body, you're saying, I move that something happens. So let's say you want to have a bake sale in your circle, and you want the president to know that this is something that you really want to discuss in your meeting. You're saying, I move that we have a big sale for our fundraiser in the national circle. And another member will do something called seconding, which basically says, yeah, I agree that this matter should be heard. And then from that chain of events comes the decision making process. So there's infinite ways that may go, but ultimately it's, do we decide now? Do we decide later? Do we decide that we don't want to discuss this at all? And then ultimately it ends with a vote and a decision to do what we wanted to do or not do what we wanted to do. And ultimately the process that occurs is an orderly process that helps things make sense. And so Robert's Rule of Order has been around in organizations for, like I said, since the 1800s, helping organizations to make orderly decisions, so ultimately help their organizations thrive and survive. And we will learn a little bit more as we go along today. So I'm going to give you some strategies for running productive and efficient meetings, because in general, when our members come to us, they just want to know, what are we supposed to do here? Why are we here? What is the purpose of this meeting? And what are the actions that we're going to take after this meeting? So one of the first steps and strategies for running a productive and efficient meeting is to set clear objectives. You want your participants to know why they're coming to the meeting, what is going to be discussed at this meeting, and we want to give our participants ample time to get this information. So part of that way is that you prepare an agenda. An agenda basically, it sets the timing for the events that will occur during your meeting. And good meeting practice is to actually send your agenda out before the meeting, in the call of the meeting. And that's when you send out the email or whatever device you use to get someone to come to a meeting, you put your agenda in there so that they get a chance to review it. And that also prepares them to help you along in that agenda. Another strategy is to sticking to your agenda. And I know that there may be times where a special event may occur, or new business needs to be brought up that may alter the agenda. But for the most part, unless it's a decision by the body, you should stick to your agenda. And that means sticking to the time that you allot for the activities that are taking place during that meeting. And that comes to your time management. If you're not actually watching the time yourself, you should have a partner that's at your meeting, whether that is your vice president or another member that will just hold you to your time, saying, uh, Madam President, Mr. President, you have 5 minutes left on this topic. That keeps you on your agenda, and it also respects the time of your participants. Because I don't know about you, but I've come to meetings where they said that something will take a half an hour or an hour, and then you look up and it's 3 hours later, and you're just like, why am I still here in the same meeting? And it didn't seem like anything got done. And then another tip is to follow up, because we want to make sure that our members understand the decisions that were actually being made during the course of the meeting that you hold. And so as decisions come across, you need to summarize the decision and then also assign action items. So for example, if you're saying we want to have a bake sale for the National Circle, we want to set time limits. So Johnny will go and get the cookies. Missy will set up the payment system so that we can accept donations for the cookies. We'll hold it on a Saturday, March 17th. Again, we're giving parameters in place so that people know exactly what's going on when you're actually having events or you're planning activities for your organization. This helps to keep your meeting running smoothly and efficiently. So, there's a standard order of business according to Robert's rules, and there is an acronym that is used to kind of help you to understand that plan of order, and it's called 3R Sun. So there's three R's that begin, and then the Sun is the other aspects of a good meeting agenda. So one of the first things that you want to do is before the call of the meeting, send out uh, minutes from your prior meetings. You also want to send out the agenda. So that way, when your guests come, they actually know what is going on at the call of the meeting and they are prepared to help you make decisions. So the first R is reading and approving the minutes from the last meeting, followed by the reports of your officers, your board members, and your standing committees. And then if you have a special or ad hoc committee, you have the reports of those committees in that meeting. If you don't have ad hoc committees, that's one of the R's that will disappear. But in case your organization does have special committees, that section is where the reports will come in. Then you have special orders. So for example, um, if you have the president of the United States is coming to your meeting and you want to let members know that in the middle of their agenda, this is something that is going to occur, that's where your special orders would take place. Or the mayor of the town is coming and you want to know, let your members know that during the meeting there will be a break to discuss or address the mayor, then that is where you'll see the special orders, followed by unfinished business and general order. So anything that happened in the last meeting that you need to address will come in that section. And then finally, new business. So in the image, you see that this gives you a agenda that is orderly. People can follow it, and it helps you to move ahead as you make decisions in your organization. And if you're, especially if your organization has multiple meetings a month, it gives you a tool and a mechanism to make those meetings efficiently, and it actually will take the time that you set aside for the meeting. So if you set aside an hour for the meeting, your meeting will actually take that hour versus any additions to the meeting that wasn't expected. And it also helps you as the presiding officer or you as the attendee to keep order while you're doing your business. So how do you create a impactful agenda? And so one of the first things that I talked about was timing. You want to make sure that you allocate time for the topics that are the most important. Especially, you want to prioritize the topics that have the most impact on your organization. So, for example, when you have elections, or if you need to do a major fundraiser, or membership intake, or anything that will affect your organization in a big way, you want to make sure that those topics come first in your agenda and also have the right amount of time allotted to it. And the reason why that is important is because you want to make sure that you don't spend too much time on an area that is not uh, the most important to the organization's success. And the second thing, as I stated, you want to make sure that you provide materials for your members so that they have all the information they need to make good decisions. As an organization, we want to make sure that we protect our organizations so they're around in the future for other generations to be able to experience. And in that instance, we want to make sure that if we have a decision that we want our body to make, they have as much information as they possibly can have to be able to make good decisions. And distributing the documents in advance helps them to do that. And it sets up a level of transparency as well, because it gives them the sense that, hey, my leadership wants me to know these things and they want me to keep me abreast about what's happening in my own organization. And time allocation, we want to make sure that we put the right amount of time in the right areas, especially if a topic is contentious. We want to make sure that we give enough time for the members to have their voice. One of the key principles of Roberts is that we don't want to impinge or basically disenfranchise any of your members. So you want to give them the opportunity to discuss issues as they come up, to make sure that they feel that they are part of the decision making process. And then a consent agenda is basically saying that uh, the group says, this is the agenda for the night, this is the agreed upon topics, and we agree that we will be talking about these areas. So in a lot of cases, we can ask that the body adopt the agenda, or if they need to make changes to the agenda, we have them vote on that prior to starting the meeting. And that keeps us on time, and it also lets your members know what's coming as you go through your agenda. So group dynamics. So we know whether it's a new group, it's an old group, or it's a committee that's being formed for the first time. We have forming, storming, norming, and performing. This is a topic that has been talked about for decades, about groups and how they get together to make decisions. And so one of the first things that we want to do when we get together in groups is that we want to encourage our members to be participatory in the activities of the organization. We want them to know what's going on, and we want them to feel like they can participate. So one of the ways that we can do that is to use open-ended questions when you're talking to your members, especially if you give them one where it's just yes or no. You basically cut off the avenues for conversation. So if you only ask yes or no questions, it'll just be like yes, no, and you don't really get the opinions of your members by using just yes or no questions. So, for example, your open ended question would be, um, what activities do you prefer that the organization focus on this quarter? And that kind of gives them an opportunity to talk about some things that may be on their mind for the organization to participate in. And it also gives them an opportunity to potentially suggest something that they might have been shy about. By you asking those questions in an open-ended fashion, you give your quieter members the opportunity to express their opinions, and then also potentially provide you with good programming. The next technique is address dominance. We do know that we have our stronger personalities sometimes that tend to want to talk the most. And so, one of the strategies as a good leader is to address dominance when you see it. So, you would want to politely redirect those overbearing participants, especially on issues. You might say, hey, the discussion is only going to be for 10 minutes. You are only allowed to speak once on the topic. And you basically say, well, this gives our members an opportunity to get their voices in as we are having these discussions. By setting the time limits and also setting the ground rules with your members, you're letting them know that you, number one, care that their opinions matter. And number two, that you're letting members that may be a little bit dominant know that you are the one that's in charge and that you are prepared to make sure that all your members have the opportunity to speak. And so another technique is to foster collaboration. You want to always let your members know of the goals and desires of your organization. You want to make them feel like they are a part of your organization's success. And in order to do that, you have to emphasize the shared goals of the organization, but also let them know that this will be mutually respectful, that you will give them the level of respect, support necessary to make sure that they feel welcome in your organization, and you're also giving them the opportunity to want to speak out, because there's a lot of times where if you're in an organization and you feel like your voice isn't heard or your presence isn't valued, it makes you less likely to want to participate. So one of the greatest ways to be able to foster that sense of collaboration is to ask questions of your members, whether that's through a survey, whether it's for uh, maybe an anonymous way of sharing ideas. Maybe you have like a suggestion box, a virtual suggestion box if you're like the National Circle and you're virtual. That way, if the member doesn't necessarily want to identify themselves as the idea person, it gives them an opportunity to still participate. And then finally, you need to handle disagreements as they come up. And you know that at various times during conversations, conversations may be contentious, but we want to make sure that we use parliamentary motions to resolve some of these conflicts. And I'll talk a little bit more about the motions that you can use to bring back order to your meetings. But one of the best ways that that you will foster that sense of respect in your organizations is when you see um, potential causes of strife in your organization, you stop it as quickly as you possibly can to make sure that there is no acrimony amongst your members, and your members don't feel like they are being abused while they're coming to your meetings.
Hey, Denisha,
Yes,
we do have a
ma'am.
question in our
Mm.
Q&A that is relevant to this section.
Okay.
How can you keep more dominant members from disengaging and feeling as if they are too much? There's that fine line between scolding somebody to where they just shut down or cutting them off when appropriate, but keeping them engaged in the conversation.
Absolutely. So one of the ways that you can keep a dominant member engaged, even when they feel like they may be being shut down, is you're you have to have a sense of quote unquote diplomacy. And in those instances, you're saying that, hi guys, I know that you're passionate about this topic and your voices will be heard, but ultimately to give people the opportunity to also chime in, can we well, not table because that's a different term, but can you let someone else speak for a second, and then we will get back to you on your points if there's time. So you kind of, it's a little bit of a balancing act where um you're setting the ground rules ahead of time so that they know it's not them that's personally being targeted, by saying, hey, the conversation is going to be 10 minutes, we're limiting people to speak once, and if there's still time remaining on this topic, then we will come back to you to continue on with other points that you may have. So that kind of gives you the opportunity to be able to let all the voices that want to speak, but you're also kind of limiting how often that person would speak without stepping on them, quote unquote.
That's great. Thank you so much.
So here's how you can use some parliamentary procedures to help resolve some conflict. So one of the first things that you want to do, especially either as a participant or as a presiding officer, you can call a point of order. A point of order basically stops procedural errors as they happen. So, for example, if I make a misstep as the presiding officer, and I say something wrong about um, a date of an event, or I say that, oh well, no one gets to speak against me because I'm the chair and I all rules are mine and I'm the king of the organization. You as a member will say, point of order, Madam President. No, this is not a kingdom or a fiefdom. You don't get to say that what you say goes. This is a deliberate body and we have the opportunity to speak. And that's where you would use point of order. Is basically to address procedural errors as they come up. And you want to do them as early as possible as it happens to kind of prevent action from being taken place that is not in order. So a point of order actually helps you to draw the speaker or the participant's attention to an error that is occurring before it gets implemented by the organization. Um, then there's the conversation about tabling. And as, a couple of seconds ago, I had walked back the term tabling because that actually is a point where you want to defer contentious topics at a later discussion. Um, so if you put something on the table, you have to pick it up during the call of that meeting or at a specific time, or that issue becomes something that you won't be able to address again. So a lot of times people use the motion to table incorrectly. They think that tabling just means, oh, if I don't want to talk about this, I just put it down and then just never come back to it. That's technically not the way you quote unquote kill um, a topic that you don't want to discuss. There's something called postpone indefinitely. Postpone indefinitely when you want to action to be stopped in its tracks. You say, I want to postpone this topic indefinitely, and that kills the motion without bringing it to vote. That postpone indefinitely, though, is something that requires a majority vote of your members to kill that. So you want to make sure if you're suggesting the postpone indefinitely something that is of vital importance to your organization, that you don't allow that vote to pass in the affirmative, because then you won't be able to address it in that meeting or at a later date. And then we have amendments, which you modify proposals of somebody's suggestion with their consensus. So for example, um, I had a motion to have a bake sale for our fundraiser, but Tom feels that instead of a bake sale, we should sell popcorn. So he amends my motion to have a bake sale for our fundraiser to, I move that we amend the motion on the floor to have a bake sale for our fundraiser and instead have a popcorn sale. So amendments are used to change proposals to fit someone else's desires, but it also uh, requires the consensus of the person that made the original motion. So they would have to agree that, okay, well, if I think the popcorn would probably be better decision, so you can go ahead and change um, the fundraiser type. And then finally, we want to make sure that we vote on decisions because, again, this is not a kingdom. We want to make sure that our members have the opportunity to have their voices heard, and through their vote, that's how we make decisions. So we use majority rule to finalize our decisions. So a motion will pass either affirmatively or negatively based on the voting members um, that are at your meeting at the time. Michelle, are there any other questions that came up?
I actually have a question.
Mhm.
Early on, you talked about how Robert's rules and parliamentary procedure can be adaptable to your group. Could you
Mhm.
speak a little bit about the difference between running, a big national meeting with hundreds of participants and maybe just a board meeting that has a dozen participants? Do you have some tips on how to, as a leader, kind of determine how much parliamentary procedure are we going to use in a meeting?
So it depends on the type of meeting that you're having, right? Because I think we ultimately want to make sure that no matter what the size of the organization is, that we are addressing the severity of the decisions that are being made. So for example, if we're having a board meeting with uh some committees on it and it's 7 people, we still want to have a democratic process of making decisions. So I'm not necessarily saying that you have to do the full on, I move that we do this or that or the third, but you do also want to make sure that you do, when you're making decisions, that you do vote on it as a group, and then make sure that you document the decision, whether the decision failed or if it went through. So for example, um we're at a committee meeting and we want to have a dance as the fundraising committee, and we're together as a small group and we're making a decision that is ultimately going to affect the larger body, right? We want to vote on the theme, we might want to vote on when the event will actually occur. We might want to vote on the cost. There's a number of things that will occur depending on the severity of the decision. Some organizations, and this is whether it's civic or just regular groups, have more of a lax policy when it comes to using Robert's rules. They might use Roberts when their bylaws might be silent on whether they have to vote on a decision or not vote on it. They may use Roberts all the time, and that's not wrong either. And they might use a hybrid of sorts. They might use the full on procedural process when it's a topic like voting, like your elections versus a popcorn sale, because maybe you don't need to do the full on, oh, I moved to have a popcorn sale. They might not want to do that for a decision that may not have high impact on your organization.
And
Did that?
could you
Mhm.
speak to having committees if you're part of a larger organization and there's committees that give a report? Is there part of parliamentary procedure where, okay, if it's a committee report, we don't need a second, it's already moved to deal with it as business? Is that an example of adapting to maybe a larger organization situation?
Right. So, for example, we might uh, accept the minutes by consensus, right? So, uh, if we sent it out ahead of time and we've given our members enough time to read the minutes beforehand, you may say, I move to accept all the minutes by consensus, and unless there's an objection. And then if there is no objection, that those minutes are now accepted. You don't need to have the full on, I move, I second, all that, those type of things. Consensus votes are one of the ways that you may not need to do the full on moving and seconding, specifically because you gave them the information ahead of time. If you give them the minutes in the meeting, that's usually the point where you have people going through it with a fine tooth comb because they feel like, hey, something may be being hidden from me. So now I really got to look through this thing before I say, yes, this document can be accepted. So one of the main techniques that I said ahead of time is give the people the stuff in a timely manner so that they know what's coming their way, because if I feel like you're being sneaky, I might, just to kind of needle you, uh, make it go through the full process, because no, you're hiding information by giving it to me the day of instead of giving me the ample time to review it on my own time.
Mhm. I think I've seen and I want you to get back to the next slide, but I think I've seen it used most stringently in kind of a student government situation or a student senate at a university. And then you also see examples of parliamentary procedure in, a county commission meeting or
Hmm.
public government. And I just always find it interesting that those in comparison to maybe a nonprofit board, I've been on nonprofit boards where we make motions and we might table discussion or we have an agenda, but we don't use every aspect of parliamentary procedure so strictly.
Right, and the thing about it is that it there is such a thing called custom, and there is also such a thing called organizations uh, using it at their discretion. And so there, Roberts is typically going to be your your reference when your bylaws are silent on something, and you're not going to beat people up with the book, because I do know that when as people really do study parliamentary procedure, they use Roberts as a bludgeon rather than what it is a tool of helping us to make good decisions. And so I would advise you not to do parliamentary malfeasance and using the Roberts as a tool to beat your fellow members up. I think that will also be counterproductive to the end goals of the society, which is to make good decisions and do good in the world.
Love the way you put that. Thank you.
No worries. Okay, so one of my favorite things, handling challenging participants. So if you have a copy of Roberts, and I would suggest that you keep a copy of Roberts handy, whether you're a parliamentarian or not. It helps you to kind of see various scenarios in parliamentary procedure to ultimately help you to make decisions. So, chapter 20 of Roberts is one of my favorite chapters in that book. And I know that sounds really nerdy, but it's on the chapter on discipline. And that helps you to handle uh, contentious situations if your bylaws are silent on how you deal with a member that isn't behaving well or behaving according to your code of conduct. So we want to make sure that when disruptive behavior occurs, you call your meeting to order. So you would say to, while that person may be standing up and screaming, you might say, I've called the meeting to order. You're not in order speaking right now. Please uh, stop speaking, or you may be removed from the meeting. I know that may also at a point make the person a little bit more amped, but majority of reasonable people do not want to be ejected from a meeting. So if you're saying that you're not in good standing with your behavior at this point, and I need you to come to order, that's one of the ways that you're helping to refocus your group to discuss things in a calm manner. Another way of doing that is to say, if you will continue to yell, we will stop discussion, or we will call to adjourn this meeting. I know it's not something that's typically that occurs, but you're letting them know that um, the code of conduct will be upheld, and that you expect them to behave in a manner that um, befits the organization. So you want to make sure that when disruptive behavior occurs, you don't you don't discriminate in terms of letting it go with one person and then letting it happen to other. For every instance where there's disruptive behavior, you call the meeting to order and let them know whether it's quote unquote harmless or if it's more serious, that you want them to behave with decorum and that you want them to participate in a meaningful and reasonable manner so that we can continue to conduct business. And another way, especially, is when you have side conversations during a meeting. I know that we do have a lot of virtual meetings, so side conversations really aren't a thing. But if you're in person and people are talking while you're trying to get agenda items out, I would like to say we are in one meeting, please. One meeting. So please limit any side conversations. If you do have to speak on the side to someone, please politely exit the room and then come back when you're finished with that conversation. One of the ways that you're doing that is that you're establishing your authority in this instance. And you're also setting the boundaries for respect in your meetings. And when you make sure that you're not discriminate about that, you're meaning that no matter who the person is, you're saying the same things to everyone, then there is no feeling of contention to be had, because you're literally setting the ground rules and establishing how you expect your meetings to run while you're running them. And Roberts talks about this specifically about personal attacks. You need to intervene firmly when any members speaks against another member in a disparaging way, because no one likes to feel like they are being berated or belittled in conversation. So you want to let members know, especially if they go to any personal attacks, that that behavior is not acceptable, and that you should be limiting comments to facts, not feelings. So you want them to actually keep the conversation um, directed to the topic at hand, and not about a person in particular. And specifically, if you're using Roberts in this methodology, one of the ways that we do that is that we direct comments to the chair. So we'll say, instead of saying, John, I don't like your idea, we're like, you would rather have them say, Madam President, Mr. President, I believe that the decision that we just, or the conversation that we just had, is uh, ill suited for our organization because of these reasons. And it's basically not attacking the person, it's attacking the idea. And I know that that in itself may seem like a little bit of a catch 22, but you have to intervene when it becomes personal, because acrimonious feelings do tend to spill over. And then it also changes the dynamics of your group. Again, but if you're making your objections known, if you say, Madam Chair, I don't agree with the decision that was just brought to the floor, or the idea that was brought to the floor because of these reasons, then you can say to the member, so what specifically do you object to? And please keep it to the facts at hand, and not about the person that brought the idea or the decision to the floor. And then we do know that in any organization, we do tend to have some overly critical members. And you want to make sure that even if they are a member that might be critical of you, that you acknowledge their concerns, because their concerns are just as valid as anyone else's. But you do want to try to move forward constructively. So you would say things like, Member A, I heard your concerns. We will get back to you at a later date once we have a little bit more information at hand. You just brought the information to the floor, and we will make sure that we firmly research the topic at hand before we come back to you with an answer. And we'll have that answer to you either in email or in the next meeting. That way, you're firmly letting them know that you heard what they said, that you're not just throwing it away. But again, you don't want the attention to be redirected in a negative sense. You want to always keep it at the level. And that actually builds trust and respect amongst your members, because they know that you will never um, just outright dismiss what they're bringing to the floor, but you will let them know that you're not going to let them shift the direction of the meeting.
Mhm. We
Any
do
other
have a few
questions?
questions in the
Mm-hmm.
chat, so thanks to those that are posting questions. I think we answered Tabitha's question with your last statements, but Tabitha, please add more if we did not answer your question live. GC Murray, welcome to the webinar. How does the concept of tabling interact with time limits for discussion? If the allotted discussion time runs out, is the item automatically tabled, or does the group proceed directly to a vote?
Right. So there's a number of ways you can do it. You can extend the time of the conversation by a specific amount. So you would say, I move to extend the conversation by 5 minutes. And you actually vote on whether or not you get to do it. And if that vote fails, uh, no, the discussion is not going to continue. And so you would say, and now the question is, whatever the topic at hand was. You can also do something called calling the question, which is basically immediately uh, ending discussion and moving it to a vote. That, and again, they can object to that as well. But when you call the question, it basically says, hey, we've been beating around this bush around. There's no more time on this, so now I'm calling the question so that we can get to the actual decision making at that point. And so when you call the question, you say, hey, I call that question. And then the chair will immediately say the question at hand is that we are voting on whether or not we are having a popcorn fundraiser on July 10th. And the cost of a ticket is $10. And so you're basically reiterating to your audience exactly what we've been discussing the entire time that we had the discussion, and then you're also giving them the information about what they're actually voting on. Because again, sometimes in these conversations, the original intent of the question gets lost because of all the back and forth that occurs. So you kind of want to, whether you're jotting it down on a piece of paper next to you, or if you have a parliamentarian that's on the next to you, that is kind of helping the chair keep notes on what's actually occurring during the meeting. This way, you as the presiding officer will have the information at hand about what you've been discussing, and also helps you to tell your members really what decision that you're going to be making and what the impact of that decision may be.
Great. And then another question regarding seconding a motion. So an anonymous attendee has asked, can you clarify regarding seconds? Are they required for discussion to take place, but then the person who seconds does not have to be in favor of the motion? Is that correct?
Correct. So in certain cases, if the chair continues without a second, you've de facto ignored the process and you've allowed it to go on. But technically speaking, as the chair, you're supposed to wait for a second, because that second is saying that they agree to hear the topic. So if you don't get a second, then you wouldn't even begin the conversation in normal cases. But a lot of times you have an overzealous chair that doesn't even wait for the second and just says, okay, we're going to discuss what this is about, but the members never actually agreed to the topic in the first place. So technically the second is required, but if you start discussing the issue without the second, it's kind of like a de facto seconding. So as a chair, you want to be very careful to, number one, listen for someone to say I second. And if you hear the second, then you say the motion was duly seconded by this person. You make sure you find out who was the one that called the second. So they're the ones that said that they agreed to this topic being brought to the membership in the first place. And then you proceed with, is there any discussion on the topic at hand? And then you also want to make sure that you keep it to that topic at hand, because if you start talking about something else, that's something called dilatory. That means that you're not literally addressing the subject at hand, you're addressing something entirely different. So you kind of want to make sure that you're discussing the root of the issue first, deal with it with either amendment or uh, getting rid of it altogether by saying, hey, I think we need to postpone this conversation indefinitely. That means that you killed the motion that was on the floor and you move on to the next topic.
So if
So
there is no second, if I'm the chair and a person who thinks they have a great idea, but nobody else is agreeing with it or isn't really interested in it, maybe they agree, but they're just not interested in it and discussing it, and nobody seconds it, then as the chair, can you just say the motion dies?
you would say, you would literally wait. Is there a second? If no one will second, you say, your motion hasn't been seconded, so we're going to move on to the next topic. And
Great.
then back to, I think there was a question, something about tabling. So tabling, it, it's supposed to, the device of tabling means that you're putting it on the table for a reason. There's a cause for putting it on the table. For example, I'm putting it on the table because I don't have enough information to make a decision on this, and we will pick it up. We're tabling it to give it to a special committee, for example, or we're tabling it until we get more information on the cause that you're trying to get us involved in. We don't have enough information at the current moment to make a decision, so we're tabling this until the next meeting where we have enough time to make a decision. Or for example, someone is having an episode in your meeting, meaning like they may have a medical emergency, and you're tabling it for the purpose of addressing the medical emergency, and then you'll get back to it after that emergency has been dealt with. Or maybe a dignitary walked into the room and it was a surprise that this dignitary walked in. And so I'm tabling this until we deal with the dignitary, and then we'll bring it back to the floor once the dignitary leaves. So the tabling is not designed to just put away things that you don't want to talk about, because if it's something
Mhm.
that you don't want to talk about, you just want to postpone it indefinitely, and that means that the motion dies.
I think this is a good segue to your next slide, which is about leading conversations.
Hmm. So we always want to make sure that people understand what we're doing. So we want to make sure that we start with clear questions, specifically because it's hard to make a decision if you don't know what someone is asking you, right? So you want to frame your discussions around specific goals. You know that you set the agenda, you've done the work, you've set the timing. So now you want to ask meaningful questions so that discussion is productive amongst your members. So you want to make sure that you frame the question in an open-ended way, and you want to also make sure that the goal of the discussion is understood by your participants. And then that leads to you in encouraging diverse perspectives. So, for example, if you know that there's always going to be one person in your meeting that is going to give you something, whether it's relevant or not, they're going to give you something. You always want to make sure, hey, member A, that is a great suggestion. Um, does anyone else have anything that they would like to add to this conversation? And so you basically would go around in the room, and if they're not uncomfortable with being asked, be like, member C, what do you think about this? And you kind of go around the room to hear the voices in the room. And if they don't have anything to say, they will say, I don't have anything to add to that, Mr. President, Madam President. And you move around the room, giving people the opportunity to speak up should they choose. And again, if they're not discussing the topic, you say, okay, well, if you have no other thoughts on this, we'll bring it to a vote. And that's how you're moving decisions around the room. You ultimately, as the chair, want to summarize the key points so so that you maintain the focus of the discussion. You want your participants to understand what's going on at every moment of the discussion. And so you don't want the what are we doing now? Because I trust me, and I know you've sat in meetings where you're just like, what are we discussing now? Like, what's happening here? You want to make sure that you periodically recap what we're discussing so that you maintain focus. And of course, you bring people back to the center if, for example, um, they're watching the basketball scores in between your meeting, because again, we do tend to have a lot of nighttime meetings during sports season. So maybe somebody is paying attention to the score instead of paying attention to the topic at hand. So you summarizing the key points actually brings back the focus to the meeting of itself. And we know that decisions are made in multiple ways, but we want to draw it back to the discussion at hand, and then also make sure that people can um, make good decisions by you being the facilitator. You're using the motions to guide the group towards a conclusion, and the conclusion is a decision in the affirmative or a decision in a negative not to do a particular action. And it's really, and the point that Michelle made is that it's really difficult, especially in Zoom, when people are distracted by things in the background. The dog might be barking, your kids may be have killing each other in the corner, and you're just basically all over the place trying to have multiple focuses. By bringing people back into the conversation, and letting them know where you're at in the conversation, where we're at in terms of the vote, you're also letting them know about the decisions that are being brought to the table. So, for example, um, back to the idea of us having the dance, you're bringing back the attention to the group, saying, hey, the opportunity to do this dance, we will potentially make $700 in profit from the entire ticket sales, and that will help us to fund the scholarship for the next semester. That kind of giving them the end results of the decisions that will be made gives them the best tools to make good decisions within your organization. So, um, I'm going to, since we have Michelle here, Michelle, can you be member A, and Brent, can you be member B?
Let's do it.
Okay, so I'm the chair in this situation, and oops, I'm so sorry about that. The meeting will come to order. Thank you all for being here today. We have a lot to discuss, so let's get started. The first item of business is to adopt the agenda. The proposed agenda has been distributed to all the members. Are there any objections to adopting the agenda as presented? Are there any objections? Hearing none, the agenda is adopted.
Madam Chair, I move to amend the agenda to add a discussion about volunteer recruitment under new business.
I second the
Um,
motion.
Awesome. It has been moved and seconded to amend the agenda. Is there any discussion? So, uh, member A, you made the motion to amend the agenda. Is there anything that you'd like to speak to that motion? It's just you. It's free flowing. We can just say anything.
Yeah, I want to talk about volunteer recruitment under new business.
Awesome. So, and the seconder, do you have anything to say to amending?
No, I agree with what she said.
Okay, great. So we've now had our discussion about this, and we want to proceed to the vote. We will now vote on the motion to amend the agenda. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say no. Okay, so the motion carries. The agenda is amended to include a discussion about volunteer recruitment under new business. So I know this is a simplistic example, but this is practical ways that we literally can make a decision in a very short period of time. There wasn't really much contention, but when you give your members the opportunity to go ahead and change the direction of the conversation, you're empowering your members to be able to feel like they are part of the process. You gave them the agendas ahead of time so that they know that they could potentially modify it. And it makes these discussions a little bit smoother. So imagine if I had come in with the agenda today and just handed it to you and be like, okay, well, this is the agenda that we have, and like it or lump it. That, I mean, I don't know if that's the leadership
Or
style
worse,
that
hey
you
everybody,
choose.
what do you want to talk about today?
All right. And so this kind of opens the door for chaos in your meetings when you just don't prepare ahead of time. And let's say you know your membership and you know that a topic that you're bringing up is going to be a little bit fraught with tension. You want to be able to anticipate some of those members that would be objecting or objectionable in your meetings. So you would want to potentially practice with your vice president about things that you can say to direct the conversation. One of the things that I love about parliamentary procedure, which is why I ended up becoming certified in it, is that it's an art and it's a science. You want to be able to get things done in your organization. At the same token, you want to make sure that you are helping your members to make the best decisions that they possibly can, because ultimately good decisions leads to the continuity of your organization. Bad decisions, unfortunately, ends you up in the newspaper, ends you up in some cases handcuffs, and other in institution in other ways can lead to the end of your institution. So it's very important that we talk about things as a group. Number one, that people are abreast of the decisions, and that people feel like they're being an active participant. And when they're given that level of respect, they will continue to come back. They will continue to bring new members in, and then your organization will continue to thrive. Just think about ODK, for example. It's been around since 1914. That is a marvelous and miraculous thing in a lot of ways, that a lot of organizations don't last past 5 years when they first start. And the fact that organizations like this one is hundreds of years, 100+ years old, tells you that the people care, they value the decisions that we make, and then ultimately we want the continuity of our organizations. So, tips for effective meeting leadership: be prepared. And failure to prepare is preparing to fail. And I love that statement. You want to make sure that you review your agendas and your materials in advance. You provide that material to your members in advance so that they are aware of what's going on and that they're prepared to come in to make good decisions. As a chair, one of the rules of Roberts, if you are the presiding officer, you should not be swaying your membership's decision in one way or the other. If you're going to participate in debate as the chair, you literally have to give up your seat as chair for that particular topic. So, for example, if I am supremely passionate about a specific item and I want to speak to that item as a presiding officer, I would literally be saying that because I want to participate in this discussion, I am giving my seat as chair to my vice president while I discuss the issue. And you don't take back their position as presiding officer until that matter is complete. And that is something that I've seen in organizations where the president or the presiding officer will be directly involved in the decision making and kind of trying to sway it in one direction or another. That is bad practice, and we should not do that. We should be staying neutral to make sure that we facilitate the discussions without leading your members to one way or another. If in fact you want to lead them one way or other, and this is kind of funny, but you have your plants in the room, you have a discussion with someone that is going to participate in the discussion and let them argue the points on their behalf about why this is a good decision for the organization. And when I say a plant, I don't mean like someone that is going to be like a de facto chair pushing the decision. It's someone that will clearly be passionate about the discussion and can speak to the topic cogently in a way that will help members make a decision either positively or negatively on an issue. And one of the questions earlier about does the size of the group matter? So you want to adjust your approach based on the group dynamic. So if it's a wide group of people where there's hundreds of members, you're not going to approach the decision making with hundreds of members the way that you would make a decision when there's only 8. Why? Because again, we want to make sure that we don't step on the minority, meaning that the one that is in the minority, we don't want to make them disenfranchised, but we also want to make sure that we are allowing the voices to be heard that want to be heard. So whether it's a group of 300 or a group of 10, you want to make sure that people have the opportunity to speak up about the issues at hand, and that helps you to keep dynamics, number one, I don't want to say stress-free, but you want to keep the dynamics at a cooler tone rather than a heated discussion every time you go into a meeting. I've been in situations where members have been at war, and it's not a good feeling. And as a chair, you want to make sure that your members feel like they're being engaged in the way that they want to. And number 2, that they get an opportunity to speak about issues that are of vital importance to them. And then follow up. The follow up is one of the best ways for us as a group to keep our word. If we have action items, make sure that those action items are completed, give them timelines, let them know that if you're researching something because you don't have enough information on it, that you actually do take the time and do the research and come back to your membership, because that's a level of care and respect that they will appreciate from you. Is there any other questions in the group before I move on? Yeah, so if there's no questions in the group, please feel free to ask any more questions in the Q&A section, because I'm sure there's things that may have come up that you did not discuss that I want to be able to answer for you. And ultimately, if there's anything that I've said tonight that you need clarification for, please feel free to ask it at this moment.
Like our Q&A is wide open. Getting some thank yous. Thank you so much for all this information. We are recording this. This will be posted to the Omicron Delta Kappa YouTube page as soon as the recording is available. And we'll be sending a follow-up to all of our registrants and participants tonight. Here's a question, Dr. V. Lawrence, who can use the point of order option?
Any member can use the point of order. So any member that sees a procedural error as it comes along can use point of order.
And then how about accepting minutes by consensus? Who makes that motion?
So you can literally walk in and say, hey, the minutes, as the chair, you can say the minutes have been sent to you, and I would like you to basically, if there's no objections, you as the chair, if there's no objections, we want to accept these minutes without correction. And then if they object, then that's the point where you have to go back and say, hey, what is your objection to accepting the meeting minutes by consensus? So as the chair, you can suggest that yourself.
Great. While our session was going on, we actually did our door prize drawing already. We'll be providing a copy of Robert's Rules of Order to a member of our participants tonight. And congratulations to Kelly Gordon. So we'll be emailing you to get your information and send you a copy of Robert's Rules of Order.
Congratulations to Kelly. I can say to you that Roberts is a tool that is very, very helpful, especially when reading it, because as part of becoming a professional registered parliamentarian, I literally read Roberts from cover to cover in order to go through the rigorous examinations that it takes to become a registered parliamentarian. And so as part of that role, I would suggest that every member, whether it's Omicron Delta Kappa or any other organization that uses Roberts as their guiding a parliamentary guide, that you have a copy, because you need to understand the decisions that are being made around you. And it also helps you as a member to understand how to also make better decisions. And if your bylaws is silent on something, you can literally go to Roberts and go into the index and read out a topic, and Roberts often will have an answer on how to address that if your bylaws doesn't give you clear directions on how to address issues at hand. This is good meeting governance. There's a possibility in the future for us to go ahead and have a parliamentary procedure of itself workshop. And that's something that will be discussed in the national circle amongst our members. It may end up being one of our teach outs at a later date. So again, we have a teach out on May 17th. And I want to give you some closing and key takeaways. Effective meetings require preparation, structure, and skill facilitation. And it's practice. So as as you practice your skills, I want you to take some of the tools and tips about agendas and being prepared and use it in the organizations that you're a member of. And you'll find that your meetings, especially committee meetings that you may be running, or if you are a circle president, you'll find that your meetings will be easier to facilitate if people know which direction that they're going in. Um, Getting a copy of Robert's Rule is, like I said, beneficial. They give all kinds of tips and suggestions on how to deal with numerous problems, especially parliamentary problems, and is a proven framework for governance. And then practice and adaptability are key to mastering all these techniques. So again, I want to thank you all for participating. For further resources or questions, feel free to reach out or connect with me. I'll leave this up for a couple seconds for my QR code to connect you to my LinkedIn page. I am Dr. Denisha McPherson, professional registered parliamentarian. I'm Omicron Delta Kappa's National Circle President, and I'm also the National Society of Black Engineers National Professional Parliamentarian. So I really am passionate about parliamentary procedure, and I am always willing to answer any questions that you may have at a later date. And of course, I feel free to connect with me and discuss anything regarding the National Circle. And you can also follow the National Circle. You can follow Omicron Delta Kappa on LinkedIn. You'll get more information about National Circle and all the other circles within the organization. And it also will give you information on any future teach out sessions that we are having, including our May 17th one. The same way that you were able to sign up for this one, you'll be able to sign up for Chris's presentation on the 17th. And then finally, just please be aware that you can join the National Circle if you do not have a circle on your campus. We deserve leaders like you, and you deserve to be honored by this illustrious organization founded in 1914. The National Circle link is in the chat, but I think we'll add it again just so that you can find it easily. And oops, sorry. And the applications for the next intake is due March 14th. So please, if you're interested in joining the National Circle, applications are open and available now. If you know of a budding leader at a campus that does not have a circle, the National Circle welcomes you. It's not only undergraduates, graduates, undergraduates, and professors are eligible to become a member of ODK's National Circle. Again, the parameters, 3.5 GPA. They have to fit one of the 5 pillars in leadership, in service, in academics, in athleticism. There's a number of pillars that are involved in ODK. And we have some very illustrious members of this organization. And ultimately, we would love to have you if you're willing to become a member. Thank you so much for coming out tonight, and thank you for supporting our first teach out. I am really pleased with the attendance, and I can't thank you enough for taking this time on a Tuesday to come and hang out with us. And of course, if you have any other further questions, please feel free to reach out. Michelle, you want to close this out?
Yes, thank you so much for sharing your expertise tonight, Denisha, and we look forward to connecting with all of you very soon.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.